Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this briefing. We'll just hold a few more minutes just to make sure anyone who's able to make it is able to join us. Okay, well, thank you very much for joining this morning. Short introduction. I'm Phil Pennington. I'm the Acting Head of Audit Consultancy at the British Safety Council. What we're going to do today is we're going to go through the specification and the changes that have been made. So, first of all, thank you for taking the time to go through this briefing so you get to understand what the changes are to the specification. But for those of you who have audited with us before, I'd like to thank you for continuing your commitments that you've shown to health and safety through your years of participation. Schemes like this are only as good as the people who are participating. I just wanted firstly to remind people of what our much missed colleague Dave Parr said about the 5-star a few years ago. He dedicated a large part of the last 15 years to making sure the audit was collaborative. It was a collaborative process that recognises the good the organisations did, but also encapsulating encouragement to clients to aspire to better. So I think this quote from Dave encapsulates perfectly what we still strive to achieve and what we believe the revised specification will continue to support, really. So, okay, so before we start, I'd like to just talk to you a bit before the specification, let you know what we do, if you're not already aware, the range of services that we offer besides the 5-star. We recognise that some organisations are at the very early start of their journey to health and safety excellence. So we can carry out health and safety health checks on their systems, mapping them to minimum legal requirements in the country or the territory that you operate in. This is often a real advantage, especially for startup businesses. We're able to offer certification to 2 ISO standards, ISO 14001, which is environmental, and 45001, which is health and safety. There's been a recent addition to the ISO 45001 family, which is ISO 45003, which many of you've probably heard of. This is psychological health and safety at work guidance, and it's the child to the parent standard. If you're familiar with ISO standards, anything that's 002, 3, 4, whatever, is guidance to support 45001. So we're able to offer this as an extension to a client's 45001. So we offer this as a recertification of scope. Of course, we have our 5-star suite of services, as you see, and we can also undertake other services from the best practice model, which are unscored. So we offer a simple RAG, so red, amber, green rating assessment, which gives you an indication of the trajectory of your health and safety management system. Finally, for many of you who have successfully achieved the 5-star, over 92% score in your audit, and you've applied, you've gone to, apologies, my screen seems to have decided to jump a bit. You've gone for the Sword and Globe, which is obviously something we award every year for excellence in those areas. We've also included wellbeing as most recent one. Okay, so over the next 20 to 30 minutes, I'll lead you through what we've changed within the 5-star and why. But first of all, we're going to start with a short recap on the value of auditing itself and the model. I'll take you through the changes that we've made, which were designed to maintain relevance whilst pushing the boundaries of what is possible in health and safety. I'll go into more detail about what some would see as the most significant changes to the model, including with the inclusion of the system maturity, before talking about the methodology adjustments that we're making this time around. I'm sure this will prompt some questions, which I'm happy to answer. If you have any questions, though, then please feel free to post them, and the events team will compile them for response at the end of today's session. Hopefully, within this session, we will address many of your queries. So without further delay, let's get started. So we all recognise that in these times of financial pressures, those deciding on budget allocation will inevitably demand more justification for investing in auditing. It's a valid and understandable position, really. Here we've highlighted some of the key messages. Unfortunately, as those who work in health and safety can attest, many benefits are sometimes not as clearly quantifiable. Making the case for investment, it can be sometimes difficult. That said, some of the benefits we will often resonate with possible advocates in the boardroom. So identifying innovation and corporate image, that's going to be an interest to the CEO, the head of marketing maybe. Employee well-being, well, that's going to capture the interest of HR. Quality management, see the value in accreditation and managing the supply chain. I think it's also worth recognising that boards are increasingly recognising the value in good occupational health and safety standards, in part because shareholders and other interested parties, they're demonstrating their interest in this area. So there's a lot of messaging that's coming out, which is very consistent. First of all, I'd like to briefly remind you what the 5-star incorporates. The plan, do, check, act model, that's really well established now. And it doesn't only seek to provide a framework for good health and safety in the here and now, it's a pathway to continuous improvement. Those of you who are familiar with the scoring will see that the points awarded in the 2023 model, they differ a little bit from previous specifications, and this was intentional. What I'd like you to ask you to keep in mind is that the points allocated to each section firstly show the emphasis that's being placed on that step in the cycle. You'll see that the points in section 2, implementation and operation, that's where most of the points can be awarded. We felt it was appropriate, given that the implementation of occupational health and safety management is both a challenge but also the largest opportunity, to showcase what you can do. It's the powerhouse of the cycle. So in simple terms, we want to see that on a day-to-day basis, you're effectively managing the safety of your stakeholders and the organization as a whole. For those of you who are familiar with the star rating, these bands haven't changed. We've kept them as they were. We didn't feel that it was necessary to adjust them within this specification, so we've kept them where they are. We would, of course, like to see all our clients reach the 5-star level, and many of you have done that over the years. Many of our clients over the years, though, haven't had the resources or their systems haven't been fully embedded enough to be able to reach 5-star at their first attempt. But what I'd like to make clear is that 3-star, as you see here, often it's an entry level, because it's described here as some elements of best practice. So I would encourage you, have a go. If you're not sure that you're 5-star, that's absolutely fine. You know, you may well be on the start of that journey. So being 3-star is nothing to be ashamed of. It shows that you're moving in that journey. So please don't let it put you off. So at this point, I'd like to just say, prior to the changes, making the changes that we made, that you'll see coming up, we consulted with our auditors, with our sales team, and most importantly, some of you, our clients. The feedback, we're extremely grateful. As with any service, the value can only be measured by the client. We can confidently claim that this is brilliant, this is great, this is an opportunity, but without the affirmation from our clients, it's sort of a bit hollow. Okay, so back to the specification. You may recall that in previous specifications, we've scored the best practice indicators. The feedback that we received indicated there was not a complete understanding of the scoring and the graphs. So they didn't really have the impact that clients really were looking for. However, there was a strong support to retain the summary statements, which I think is sensible. We get lots of good feedback from those summary statements, and I think it's something that you have the advantage of presenting to senior people, and it focuses their attention. What it does as well is it also gives you, as the client, an overview of those 5 pillars that we believe are important to an organization with a thriving occupational health and safety management system. All right, so let's look at the specification, and I'll highlight some of the changes and some of the rationale that goes behind those changes. Section 1, well, these general topics I'm sure you're familiar with. However, what we felt was these are some of the areas that there's an opportunity for clients to demonstrate innovation. So that some of these subject elements have now been included in what we've called the system maturity model. Many of you, I'm sure, are aware of this concept. It's probably one area that many practitioners have aspired to see their organizations reach. Safety excellence and safety system maturity, they sort of walk hand in hand. However, we felt that there wasn't enough emphasis, so we're setting about in the present model to rectify this. We believe that for occupational health and safety to be an asset to an organization, we've always believed it needs to be focused on keeping people safe and injury-free, whilst being aligned to the business needs. There's little value, if any, in a cumbersome system that's outdated and possibly doesn't even reflect the organization's risks or environment even. So what we decided to do, after debate and consultation, we selected particular elements we felt that should be incorporated into the first system maturity and decided on the 5 that you see here. It was agreed that for an occupational health and safety management system to grow, adapt, and be resilient, these 5 were the key areas. There are no doubt more elements, but we felt that this first foray into system maturity, these 5 allowed us to measure where clients are on the ongoing journey to excellence. Within these 5 elements, we've introduced bands. So we have 4 bands with corresponding points clients will be awarded. The levels are defined as you can see here, and the points range from 40 for effective through to 10, demonstrating the minimum. I hope you can see that the language we've used to define each step, this, I believe, embodies something we often tell colleagues and clients. Our role is to be the critical friend. The output from any BSc audit is not primarily to find fault. It's to encourage, cajole, direct, support, because we're committed to improving health and safety. That said, this is an established best practice audit, and not producing sufficient evidence and examples will result in the auditor being unable to award the highest points on offer. As many of you will remember, if you've done the 5-star over the years, it's designed to be relevant across organisations and sectors. The audit has historically relied in large part on subjective evidence. This we still have within 2023 specification. However, for the purpose of this maturity, we've now included the need for objective evidence. So this is a snapshot of what will be expected, what our auditors will need to see. Think of each process maturity level as a step. Each step, companies need to achieve certain goals to advance. There is a complete list which is available or will be made available to clients when they book. The total number of expectations is probably around about 10 per band, just to give you an idea. But that will be given to you once you book your audit. But in the meantime, what I recommend you do is refer to the 2023 specification. That contains this table, and it will give you an initial idea of what our auditors will need to see to award you the points. At this stage, I think it's important to highlight that the evidence provided shows clearly the requirements that it's established. So we define established as being in place for at least 6 months. So if it's evidence of personal health and safety objectives for senior leadership, for example, our auditor will need to see that that evidence has been published and is there and has been there for at least the last 6 months. You may find that some of the evidence isn't exactly as we define in here, and that could be because you've got something that's equal to, if not better than. So here's where we want to encourage you to show your innovation. These final 2 elements are most likely to be the ones that pose a challenge, but the biggest opportunity. Behaviours, for example, as we know, rely on multiple factors. Important one being culture. So organisations need to ensure that behaviours are not driven by one single set of requirements, rather the appreciation that there's different learning styles for employees, different languages, possibly different cultures. There's a lot of factors. So understanding how you've approached that particular issue, that's what we're encouraging you to do. That's what maturity is about. How have you identified these things and applied them to your organisation? I know that we can't say one size fits all. So we're encouraging you to take this opportunity to show how you've approached a common challenge that all practitioners within our sector have to deal with. Okay, so within section 2, we've also made some changes. We've streamlined the number of elements, but this is in no way dumbing down of the audit. It's actually rather an opportunity to make sure the audit reflects the working environment that we're currently working in. So we've considered and decided to adjust, as you can see here. Previously, you would have seen DSC, workstation, manual handling as individual elements. We've merged those together now, and we've now called them work design. Some of you may be familiar with the term because it's used very much in worker wellbeing. In this element, we're not only looking at how you've addressed the usual workstation issues, so for an office worker, desk setup, display screen equipment, seating, but also things like thermal comfort, lighting, other identified stresses. So, if you're in a manufacturing and a retail operator with employees, they're going to be subject to different impact stresses. So we wanted to ensure that you score highly. To do that, you've identified and suitably managed those particular areas that are appropriate to what you do. Again, this is an opportunity to show how you brought in some unique solutions. Again, evidence of innovation. In infection control, this was an element we introduced, I think, back in 2020, 2021, but we've removed it as an individual element this year. This really reflects the reality that infection control is now recognised as a hazard that every organisation should have identified, measured, and introduced control measures for. It's within the generalist risk assessment process. So our auditors will be looking to see if you've identified respiratory infections, fevers, bloodborne viruses, whatever's appropriate within your environment, and that's in your risk register, and maybe it's also reflected in specific activities that you do that have a risk assessment. We've not disregarded some of the detailed questions around infection management. Rather, what we've done is encompass them into element 2.09, which looks at exposure to hazardous substances. We've created a subsection that focuses on viral transmission. We want to ensure that the measures and controls that are being followed are actually best practice. Right, now with section 3, although the elements haven't changed significantly here, again, we're looking for evidence that you have a robust monitoring system in place. You may notice that we've now described health monitoring as health impact monitoring. It's always been a given. When we talk about health monitoring, that we're assuming primarily that organizations have measures in place, lung function testing, eye testing, maybe much more extensive testing, depending on what the role is. However, we now see that we want organizations to identify and monitor some of the mental health impacts, again, in relation to the individual's role. It's an opportunity to show how you've dealt with this issue, given that there's an emerging awareness about impacts to workers. Okay, finally, section 4. We purposely left this untouched in the main this year. However, when our auditors review your corporate social responsibility evidence, we will be looking to see if you've reviewed your approach to consider the commitments held within the United Nations Sustainability Goals. Many of these goals have elements of health and safety contained in them. So I'd encourage you, if you haven't already done it, see how those may impact your CSR objectives. You may be pleasantly surprised that you're heading in the right direction with it, or you may see opportunities that you can bring new things in that you previously haven't thought about. Okay, so the methodology. The methodology we use is exactly the same as we have done for many, many years. where it's aligned to established auditing procedures. And for those who are considering to re-audit, we've made some administrative changes. Firstly, we will require you to send a new scoping document. We want an update of the scoping document. We need to make sure that we're clear and you're clear what's within scope and what's not in scope. And it also means that if you then subsequently go on for certification of some form, whether it be 5-star or ISO certification, that we've got the name of the organisation right and we've got the venue correct. The second point that we're changing is at the point of booking, we're going to ask you now to submit a copy of your current health and safety policy. This is going to be shared with the auditor before the audit starts. The audit process itself, as you see it described here, it's relatively unchanged. Obviously, the maturity model now requires that we have to see specifically described documents, or these could be electronic or paper documents, whichever way they're described, but we need to see those as evidence. Unlike in previous years, the auditor will also have access to your previous report and what points were awarded and what recommendations were put in place. The point of this is it's so we can measure progress. Any points lost here would only apply if areas where best practice hadn't been met and not where further improvements are suggested. This is limited as well only to reports of audits that have been done in the preceding 2 years. Anything prior to 2 years is not included. This change, we believe, is an advantage because it'll help you track your progression and it will help us articulate in the report that we've recognized what steps you've made. Our auditors will obviously continue to hold interviews with a variety of stakeholders. The most important, of course, the leaders and the employees. Post-COVID, we've adapted our model slightly, and interviews with leadership, well, we prefer to do them face-to-face, but we can do them via Teams, Skype, or whatever other platform you operate from. However, we will continue to look at having other stakeholder interviews face-to-face. Finally, the operational sampling, which I'm sure you're familiar with. Here, our auditors will be looking to validate the effectiveness of your health and safety management on the ground, whether it's in a factory, a construction site, an office, an oil platform, whatever it is. As I'm sure you've noticed earlier on this presentation, the management of day-to-day health and safety is an important expectation. And that's what we're going to be looking to affirm. So we want to look and say, do you do what you say you do? The report itself hasn't changed, but within it, we'll continue to provide you with graphs showing areas that you've excelled in, but also as the critical friend, showing areas that you can improve. All in all, I guess really our team are extremely fortunate. We work with some amazing clients and we often see innovation and we want to see more. I think it's fair to say that for a good, robust health and safety, it isn't static, it's ever changing. And you're faced with new challenges that need to be overcome. We always want to focus on success. It's got to be appropriate, but we're also keen to hear not just so much about when things have been successful, but also when things haven't been as successful, and understand what steps you took. And a lot of this is down to personal honesty. We tried X, it didn't quite work the way we wanted to, but we learned from it and we did Y. That's innovation. That's where we want to see best practice, because best practice is ever evolving, and the oxygen of best practice is innovation. So within the 2023 specification, the challenge we're laying down is show us how innovation and alternative thinking has resulted in health and safety improvements. I hope I've given you a detailed flavour of the specification, the changes we made and the rationale. But if there are any other areas you're not clear on and would like clarity, happy to answer any questions. Obviously, after this webinar as well, we'll publish a full list of questions and answers as well. So David, over to you. Have we got any questions that have come in?
Hi, Phil. Yeah, thanks. We've got quite a few, actually. I'll start off with what I think is a fairly straightforward one. It goes as follows. I've normally done the health and safety audit alongside the environmental sustainability 5-star. Will there be changes to this as well?
The simple answer is yes. We're going to do a separate webinar on the environmental sustainability and the wellbeing one as well, for those of you who are interested in the wellbeing audit. That all three will follow a maturity model. There will be an element of maturity model in there. Other than that, obviously environmental sustainability, a little bit about the CSR that I mentioned earlier. There will be some questioning in that area in relation to where your goals are they aligned with the UN sustainability goals? Because obviously, as you can imagine, as many as there are health and safety related ones there are going to be equal to, and probably, if memory serves, a few more.
Okay. Great stuff, thanks, Phil. Second question, you mentioned the red, amber, green rating option. Can you explain how that differs from a scored audit?
Yeah, sure. Obviously, a scored audit is the route towards the 5-star. And if you get 5-star, then, as I mentioned earlier, sorry, most of you will know if you've been within the 5-star, you can apply then for the sword or the globe if it's for environmental. The red, amber, green rating is where you're not particularly looking at a score as such. And as I mentioned, it's a trajectory. We've used the model quite successfully when clients have wanted to have a bit of a due diligence, that they just want an assurance internally. So it's also used as a gap audit. So if you wanted to have a first pass on the 5-star, but you weren't completely sure, we can offer a RAG rated gap, which will run through all the elements and give you a sense again of where you're at. It helps with your action planning. If you're looking at objectives for 1-2 years down the line and you don't think you're 5-star just yet, it will give you an opportunity to do an internal sense check, really.
Great, thanks, Phil. We've got a few questions coming in, well, quite a few, but I'll go to the next one, which is, if I've had a change in some of the senior management team in the last few months, will that impact on us getting maximum points in the leadership element under the maturity requirements?
That's an interesting question. In practice, it all depends on the impact. It all depends on if you've got a senior management team of say 8 people, and 5 are there and 3 are new. If the 5 have done the expectation and you have plans for the other 3, one of the requirements in the maturity is to have undertaken health and safety for directors training course within the last 5 years. Now, if the majority of that senior management team have, and you've planned for those new people to have access to that training, then no, you won't be penalised for that. It's about relative to the situation. What I really want to see, and our auditors have been tasked to see, is we need to see that measures are being taken. So, that there's proactive movements. It's not a case of, oh yeah, we need to get around to doing that. No, you're proactively doing it. If you're proactively doing it, of course, we'll recognise that. We want to recognise that, because that's about being forward-thinking, planning, and doing the next stage.
Brilliant, thanks, Phil. Another question, we're certified to ISO 45001 and do the 5-star. Will you continue to offer this, and will the system maturity affect our certification? Quite specific.
Right, okay, 2-part question. Yes, we will continue to do that. There's a lot of clients that we have who are 45 and 5-star, and they get the value out of it. And of course, the system maturity will only look at the requirements within the 5-star. However, clearly, it's good evidence for continual improvement as one of the clause requirements within 45,001. So don't think if you're doing that, I don't think you'll have a problem at all with that.
Great stuff. We have a question about the stakeholder interview. Can you brief further on what the stakeholder interview is all about, basically?
Yeah, sure. Okay, well, the stakeholder interview it's about understanding whether, again, I mentioned before, are you doing what you say you do? So the stakeholder interview is identifying those people who have, ironically, a stake in your occupational health and safety management system success. So your employees, clearly, they are stakeholders. So the interviews with those, it's about we're not looking for absolute answers. When we do stakeholder interviews, we're not worried that they have to give us exactly word for word what the policy says. What we want to know is, do they understand, in essence, what's required? Do they understand where to go to get clarification of information? No one expects you to have stakeholders that are an encyclopedia that will repeat every single word, because that's just nonsense. It's just not practical. So we're looking at those people. Do they understand what's going on? Your subcontractors, maybe, or your contract people and officers. We talk about cleaners. Cleaners are stakeholders. Their activities will impact the safety of the building. What they use will be impactful. So have risk assessments been shared with them? Do they understand the control measures in place for lone working? Locking up procedure. A lot of cleaners work out of hours. So we're looking at those people with a direct impact to the success of your occupational health and safety management system. So we try not to go too far out, because the focus is the occupational health and safety management system. That's what drives this. So we're not necessarily going to be looking at things that are outside your direct control. You may influence, but not necessarily within your direct control. Hopefully that elaborates enough detail.
Great stuff. Yeah, thanks, Phil. Last question, I think, for this session. It's coming from a company based in the UAE, asking, are there any changes in how the audit is conducted from an international standard?
No, the standard is exactly the same. Obviously, we do allow for individual countries' legal requirements, and obviously the maturity does include legislation and others, so we would be looking at legislative requirements, but the expectations haven't altered in any way. We would clearly want to see innovation where there are obviously there are unique challenges in the UAE that won't be the case in the UK, Ireland, US. So we're really keen to see what you've done in UAE, because that's where, as I say, we see little tantalizing bits of innovation out there, and really keen to see more. Okay, so we've got all the questions then, David.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, if there are any further questions, then people can always email events@britsafe.org, and we'll endeavour to get those answered. And there'll also be the opportunity, I think, to ask questions in the survey following this.
Thanks everyone for attending today. I hope you've been able to get a flavour of what the 2023 specification looks like. If you want to talk more to one of our team about the audit procedure or anything about audits, the QR code here I've got on the screen, if you take that QR code, you can request a call back, and one of the team will be back in touch with you to have a conversation. And I'm always keen and happy to have the opportunity to chat with people one-on-one if there's anything that they want to discuss offline. So yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed what you've heard, and it's encouraged you to want to book your next audit, and enjoy the rest of your day.